Thank you. I will first then start to share my screen, and you tell me if that works as it should. So let's see, I'm going to do like that as well. Okay. So does that look okay on your side?
Perfect.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I wish I was with you today. I had looked forward to that, but that didn't work out. I've been visiting Ljubljana a couple of times in relation to our work on sustainable buildings. But today I am addressing you from my work, from my office. So I'm going to talk about levels, a little bit what it is and how it has started to impact the way that we are working on buildings in policy also at the European level. So levels is a European framework to assess and report on the sustainability performance of buildings. And we take a life cycle approach here. So why is life cycle thinking important? Well, based on a building's full life cycle, so from the extraction of materials to the manufacturing of construction products, the actual construction, the use, the renovation, and at the end of life. The building sector is responsible for quite a lot of resource consumption. In the EU, we assess that about half of all our extracted materials go to construction. A half of our total energy consumption, if we think about the full life cycle, is related to buildings. A third of our water consumption is what we're using in our buildings, and a third of our total generated waste is construction and demolition waste. So, circularity and life cycle thinking, we believe, are key to reach our climate change targets, because the way we are using the material of buildings and our buildings are directly linked to carbon emissions. So, levels then, what is that? It is a common language which sets out a methodology to work with a number of indicators which are linked to the environmental performance of a building. So this common language or this framework has been developed to take care of both new buildings and renovation projects, both of them. We focus on residential buildings and offices. And it has, as I said, a very detailed methodology for those different indicators. And that methodology has been developed together with the sector. There's been a very large number of building professionals involved in developing and testing the indicators, but also people from different member states, public representations as well. So levels is using as much as possible best practice industry standards. Whenever they exist, we are trying to use them. And as I mentioned, these indicators that levels is made up of has been thoroughly tested by the sector. This was a number of years ago already. It is important for us, and that has always been in our minds when we were developing levels, that it should be an entry-level tool for the mainstream market. One of the most common questions I get is, well, what is levels compared to a certification scheme? So levels is not a certification scheme. It is a common language. It sets out a number of indicators, 16 to be more precise, where we believe that we have covered the most important aspects of a building project. We set out the indicators, development and methodology for how to work with those indicators. And but we don't set values, benchmarks, or limit values. We just say, you should be looking at this. If you want to do a sustainable building, you should care about these aspects and you should assess them and report on them. But we don't set numbers, targets at this point in time. We see how certification schemes have been very keen on being part of the development and testing of levels, and they are now looking at how to align themselves with levels, or they have already started aligning themselves. So that is the link between levels and the certification scheme. Certification schemes are typically used for quite important building projects where you have typically not really amateurs when it comes to sustainability, but we want levels also to be possible to use for those who are beginners in this area. So it is an entry-level tool. And it is important for us that anyone who wants to learn about or understand better, what can I do with my building project now that I'm starting it, to actually make sure that we do the best as we can in some areas which we are interested in understanding more about, learning about, see how different decisions that we take have an impact. Their levels is there to support that kind of thinking. So there are these 6 areas that levels are covering with its indicators. So under these different areas, we have different indicators, in total 16, as I said. But so the areas are whole life carbon, so basically the energy used during the whole life cycle of the building. We have resource efficient and circular material flows, so that's the material consumption, and then the efficient use of water. So here we have 3 different areas which are directly linked to the use of resources, right? And so also a direct link to environmental performance. But we also have 3 other areas which are more linked to the quality and value of the building. So it's health and comfort, adaptation and resilience to climate change, and life cycle cost and value. So those are the areas that we focus on. And also, importantly, I want to stress that when you pick up an indicator that you're interested in, you can use that indicator at 3 different levels. Level 1, there you will have, you will use it at the concept stage of a project, and then you will work with the indicators in a qualitative way, very often through checklists that the levels methodology provides. So you will go through what it is that you've been considering in your project, but more in a way of checking checklists. And this is really helpful for the design team when they are having a focused conversation with the client on what should be really the important aspects that we want to focus on in this project. Then this level 1 is really useful. Level 2, then you're also working with indicators, but you do it in a quantitative way. So this is at the design and construction stage. And at the 3rd level, that is when you look at the actual building once it is done. You check how you performed really in comparing to how you assess that you would do on the earlier levels. And in some cases, in some indicators, you can also monitor them during the first year of use, so to see how they actually perform. Levels has also started to influence policy because it is the basis on which we are able to bring in this kind of thinking of circularity and life cycle thinking into different kinds of building policy that we are developing at the EU level. The definition of carbon performance is, I think, a very important one. So the energy performance of buildings directive, which is the directive most important for buildings, which are regulating the energy efficiency of buildings so far. It has, in December, it came out with a new proposal from the Commission because we are revising this directive. And for the first time, it starts to introduce the requirement of whole life carbon reporting into building legislation then. And this is done by referring to one of the levels indicators, actually. We are also doing some work on developing kind of a roadmap for the reduction of whole life carbon up to 2050. And here we are using one of the indicators in levels as well as a way of setting out those milestones that we will be developing together with the sector as well. We have sustainable finance, the taxonomy. You may have heard about it. Last year, there was the first legal act in this area, which was linked to climate change mitigation. And there we are using this levels indicator on whole life carbon. it is part of the criteria that you need to fulfill to have a large new building project defined as sustainable according to this sustainable finance taxonomy. This year, or I think it's still on track for this year, there will be another legal act under this umbrella on the sustainable finance taxonomy. And in this case, it will focus on circularity as opposed to climate change mitigation, which was for last year. And in the case of circularity this year, and the taxonomy which is being developed for that, with different criteria, technical criteria, again, we will be using, or we are using already in the development of it, we are using a number of the levels indicators for new buildings. And then we have a very important topic of public procurement, where we have another directive, which was the Commission proposal came out last year. It is the Energy Efficiency Directive. So also here we have started to introduce the notion of, or the concept of whole life carbon, by including a recommendation to use that in public procurement of buildings. And lastly, we are also developing a new set of, we are revising the existing green public procurement criteria, which is a voluntary tool which the Commission is providing. But we have such criteria for buildings already, but we want to update them so that they are based on levels as much as possible, and in that way also take the full life cycle into account as much as possible. So levels is indeed influencing both policy, which is sort of voluntary, and mandatory. I think I'm going to jump to this one, where I just wanted to summarize a bit the key benefits of levels, the way we see it, but also the way we understand that a lot of the building professionals which are using it see it. So it's a common language which is based on best practice industry standards. So that should make it easier for newcomers to sort of recognize themselves in the different indicators. It tracks performance throughout the full life cycle, and it brings accountability and investor confidence, the way these different indicators are built up. We've also heard a lot about how using levels in a project really enhances the dialogue between different stakeholders involved in this project, and it supports them and builds up skills and understanding in sustainability in general. And as I've already mentioned to you, it really underpins future EU, but also national, actually, policies, building policies. And we see it as a way of future-proofing our buildings for carbon neutrality in the way we are including life cycle thinking in relation to carbon emissions. So levels is for you, whether you are working in design and execution, planning and policy making, or financing. All those three kinds of stakeholders or actors were very much involved in the development and testing of levels, and they are all, of course, needed for a successful building project being sustainable. I also want to flag, before I stop talking, that we have several interesting information and tools on the Levels website. So as of a few months ago now, we have web-based e-learning, and we have an online calculator tool which can help you either to get going with levels in the e-learning. You can learn more about it there and take sort of a step-by-step introduction to the different indicators in your own pace. It's all for free, and you do it in any way you want. And the calculator is there to help you to actually do the assessment once you've started to, or once you decided to get going and pick up an indicator on whatever level, if it is level 1, 2, or 3. The calculator is there to support you with that work. I just want to flag to you that on the Levels website, we have, apart from finding those tools that I just mentioned, you can also find, I think, a quite well developed material now, step-by-step guidance on how to apply the common language framework, which Levels is, the e-learning and tools, as I just mentioned, but also all the complete user manuals, the rather thick documents, which were the sort of the backbone of levels, which we developed together with the sector during a couple of years. But we also have more accessible information, of course, in terms of newsletters and mailing lists and videos and different fact sheets and stuff. And there's also a help desk to go to. We have a very active LinkedIn group. So there you can network with levels users and policymakers involved in sustainable buildings, sorry. And you can share your own experience as well, of course. And we also publish whenever we think there is an interesting events or other things, news that you should be aware of, we put it there. And it's grown very popular in a very short time, so it's going well. We also have, among those publications that I mentioned that we have on the website, they are about 4 pages each, I think, so quite quickly to go through. And some recent ones are like What's in it for me? So the benefits of levels for a variety of different kinds of professionals. And then we have 2 different fact sheets which are relating to, one is for whole life carbon and one is for circularity. So that's quite accessible as well, I think, to get more information on those 2 quite complex concepts, actually. And then we have an interesting one on the alignment of the certification schemes that I mentioned to levels as well, how they are working and how they see it. And the very most recent one is a presentation of those 2 web-based tools that I mentioned, the e-learning and the calculation tool. So you can read more about that there if you're interested. We have a couple of videos as well. I invite you to have a look at those if they suit you. I think with that, I will thank you very much for having listened to me. And please join or have a look at the website and join our LinkedIn group. Thank you very much.